said, now I'm recording, but yeah.
These folks still live out here?
Yeah.
They still members of the church?
I don't know. It's a good question. But it's not his church anymore. So,
Right.
but yeah, it's a weird situation for, I think everyone who would have encountered him. Anyways, for those that are joining us now, again, this was the Dodger talk for today. And though I do want to say that I am proud of the fact that we have two of my former bar mitzvah boys are both working for the Dodgers today. So Drew,
What are they doing?
Drew is the, hold it a second. It's not letting me publish right now. This is not good. Switch back to your primary profile to complete. Drew works in analytics. Nancy Troxel's son, Drew, works in the analytics department. You know what that is?
I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
No, but you know what analytics department is? The analytics.
No, I don't.
Did you ever hear of Moneyball?
Moneyball?
Yes,
Yes.
that's Moneyball. What program do they use? They use what?
Program called SAS.
SAS? Okay. Do they still use SAS? They still use SAS?
Oh, yeah.
And what about the other?
Well, wait a second. Hold it a second. So anyways, the Dodgers have the largest analytics department in baseball. They have 30, they had 30, they might have more now. They have 30 people that are on the analytics team. Okay. So that's a lot. That's a lot. The other student of mine, Doreen knows who my other student is. Who's my other student? Robert Van Scoyac, Francine's son, who is the batting coach for the Dodgers. So he's the batting coach. He's the batting coach. No, so he's the hitting coach. He's the main batting coach. So those are two of my students that are now coaching the Dodgers. So in essence, I'm coaching the Dodgers. My students are now leading the Dodgers. So I take full responsibility for their 111 games. We do not have, I don't know. There's a guy on the team named, we looked him up, but we can't verify. His name is Bradley Zimmer. He's on the, but I'm not sure. Pretty Jewish name though.
Yeah.
He's Jewish until proven otherwise. No, we're looking. It's actually, no, in all seriousness, the Dodgers. I know I have to figure out how to unlock this. Because people who are on Facebook are going to get mad at me. I'm trying it on another screen. You can't see, but I'm actually trying to fix this right now, and I don't know how to do that. What was I saying? You interrupted me now. My train of thought, Joanne.
Zimmer.
No, that's not my train of thought anymore. I left. Oh, but it is close to that, which is we had a time a few years ago where there are quite a few Jewish ball players playing in the major leagues, and they were in pretty good teams, and they were pretty good players. We had people who were stars of teams. I mean, we had Kevin Youkilis that was a great ball player for the Cubs and the Red Sox, and we had Ian Kinsler who was doing really well for a while as a batter. We had a guy by the name of you have to go back a little bit further, but what's his name? Now I forget. Sean Green. Sean Green.
Then there's always
3 or 4 home runs in a game. And then we had Jock Peterson, who's still playing. He's still in the league. He's playing for the, yes. Listen, he's Jewish enough that he's playing for the Israel baseball team. Yeah. So there you go. Who? I'm trying to get it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to get on Facebook. I'm doing it right now. I'm trying to do it. I'm supposed to like hit something. No, oh, wait, here. Wait, I think I found it. So here's my thing, folks. I want to tell you that there were a few years ago, there was, oh, I think I did the last piece here. Page authorization. I'm getting started. Santa Clarita. Okay, hold it a second. Okay. Okay, hold it a second. Wait, I got. No, no, no. It says it's on my phone, and my phone was in the other room. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it, everybody. I'm gonna get a. Listen, I've been having real problems with Facebook lately, okay? I've been having real problems with Facebook, and I don't know what's going on. Facebook, I talked with a guy from the Jewish community, pretty involved in the Jewish community, and he told me that what's happening now, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. I just got this message here. I'll show you. I don't think it's going to work. Look, we're reviewing your information. So here's what's happening. Here's what's happening with Facebook, according to this guy who's pretty high up in the Jewish community. He said Facebook is doing these things where they are, so you can see this. They are coming down, they're cracking down on things that mention Judaism or Jews because they're trying to prevent hate crime stuff. But he told me that what's happening in the process is that they are screwing everything up for the Jewish organizations, because anything that mentions Judaism, they're flagging and they're causing problems. And the problem is that you can't speak to a person. You can't get a hold of a live person at Facebook. And so in their attempt to, oh, we've unlocked, whatever, that they have screwed up a lot of things for people. Well, isn't that the same?
High up in Meta.
Isn't that the same thing? No?
That is not a real person. Well,
Well,
Meta is not, because Facebook is only one company that Meta has. Instagram or something.
yeah, well, whatever. I can tell you that this guy told me it's happening all the time. And let's see if it's working. I think it's working.
There you go.
Anyways, thanks to everybody for your patience and the fact that Facebook is doing their best to protect people, but at the same time, like I said, they are causing chaos in the Jewish world. I'm not kidding. I mean, because I brought it up to the guy. I mean, I didn't bring it up to him, ask him for his help. I said to him, we've been having problems with it. And he says, you're not alone. So everybody, we are, we're going to get this working now. So we're going to share up the text. What happened at dinner?
Oh, they forgot, we ordered something at dinner.
Yeah.
Separately. And then, we were waiting and we were waiting
Yeah.
and they never put our
order in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the efficiencies of
Yes, really.
modern technology.
Yeah.
So everybody's online now?
Yeah, we're all ready to go. Mike, what are you doing? No, I don't trust you. I want to say you're hacking. Yeah, he's doing that, or he's hacking into NSA or something like that. He's starting a war. All right, well, we're going to get started because we finished up last. What? Oh, okay. So I was going to say your nose is growing.
By the way, my garden tonight.
There you go.
We didn't last time we tried that.
So what we finished with last time is the end of Achrei Mot. We talked about the or Kedoshim. Sorry, I say Achrei Mot, but it's really Kedoshim and Achrei Mot. It is sometimes read together, but the end of Kedoshim, it talked about all the things that actually you're not supposed to do, and it actually starts talking about them as punishments, with the punishments attached, including things like being stoned. Yeah, that blue The blue arrow. We're going to get rid of that. So the last thing we read was a man or woman who has a ghost or familiar spirit shall be put to death. Well, that's the lesson about witches and necromancers, and this is why they were killing witches in our country. Yeah. And one of the ways that they used to kill witches sometimes was by putting stones on top of them. They would partly to see if they were really witches, but also because of this, because it says you're supposed to hit them with stones or kill them with stones. And so people thought maybe there were stones were supposed to be part of it. So of course they also burned witches. They drowned witches, but oftentimes they would also crush them.
Just one question.
Yes.
A lot of times it says blood guilt. What is a blood guilt?
Well, it's usually the translation of this word, mayhem, or their dom, right? Bomb, the blood guilt with them, which was essentially, again, another way of saying that they, we say, we say it poetically that, the blood's on your hands, right? And we don't mean literally that there's blood on your hands, but we do mean that you're responsible for it. So if someone is going to be hurt by your actions, it's on you. And so by doing this, the blood is on their hands. If it's not done, and we actually saw it during that portion, if you don't do it, then the blood guilt's on everybody else. So we actually read it. I don't remember the verse here, but again, the verse is basically saying that if people, do this stuff, and there's not punishment for it, the blood guilt's on everybody. So, so this is an important idea in Leviticus, but in other parts of the Torah we see it too. So today we're going to read the next portion in a few chapters. The first part of this seems to have a lot to do with the priests themselves. The last part we're going to get to today is the most famous part of Amor, which is a part that's really relevant because it talks about the holidays, the Jewish holidays. It's the first time in the Torah that we get really an elucidation of all the festivals. It's not the only place, but it's the first time that we get this really descriptive understanding of the holidays. So we'll take a look at that. But first, the first couple chapters of this portion, 21 and 22, so it starts, so Adonai said to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, none shall defile himself for any dead person among his kin, except for relatives that are closest to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother. Also for a virgin sister close to him, because she has not become someone's wife, for her he may defile himself. So this law is for the priests. It's not for everyone. So up until now in Leviticus, there's some laws that are about sacrifices we read about at the very beginning. But then after that, the laws are really for everybody. It's not really about the Levites and the Kohanim. This law is about the Levites and the Kohanim in particular, which is that the priests are not allowed to come into contact with dead people. This is a pretty substantial law.
They're just the Kohanim weren't allowed.
Yeah, it doesn't say Levites. It just says the Kohanim. It says the priests.
It was sitting shiver, and two people came to say hi, but they couldn't come in the house because they were Levites.
Or Kohanim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said they couldn't come in the house, but they just wanted to let us know that they were there for us.
Yeah. So there are people who take it to that extreme, which is that they won't go to a Shiva house. Technically speaking, what it is talking about here is the cemetery, right? It's where the dead people would actually be, which is a cemetery, which means that they can't go into the cemetery and they can't walk near dead people, over a cemetery. There are people who even don't want to fly over a cemetery. There are stories of people on El Al planes. I don't know if they pull this on other flights, but they'll zip themselves up into these kind of like sleeping bag things so that they're not around over a cemetery when they're like over a certain place, like especially over Israel. They won't even fly over the cemetery. Somehow that would make it so that they're not really over the cemetery.
It was fine when this was made. Come on.
So people have taken this to very far extremes. Look, this is one of the reasons why priests would become defiled. So they would be in a state of being tame. They would be impure because they came into contact with someone dead, even unintentionally. So the problem, of course, the cemeteries, today we know where a cemetery is. The Talmud tells us that people didn't know where cemeteries were all the time, especially after a battle, especially after the Romans came in and killed everyone and just buried them in a field. So you didn't know. So one of the things that people would do is they would they would place stones at a place, even if they weren't headstones, they would mark the cemetery so that people would know. It's one of the reasons why we do put stones when we go to a cemetery where someone's buried, because that's what people did in order to mark that this was a place where someone was buried. So people did mark off cemeteries, and look, I don't want to get graphic, but people would sometimes like not know until they saw a bone poking out of the ground. And it happens even today to some extent in America, where you could have a Native American burial ground. It's not like a movie, but the reality is that if you find that, you can't build whatever you were going to build there. If it turns out that so I don't know if you know this, but if you're a developer anywhere in California, if you have a piece of land and you want to develop it, you have to hire an archaeological team to make sure that there's no remains on that site. It's already been done in your back. You don't have to worry about it in your backyard because it's already been done. Well, I guess it depends on how long ago you moved in your house. But if you moved in the house in the last 40 years, they've already done it. So an archaeological field team comes out and surveys the land and makes sure that there's no burials that have taken place on that land. So it's part of what you have to do in order to get a permit. So we have some laws like this, but in Judaism, the law was that a priest would become ritually impure in order to do this. Also relevant teaching from this for the Ateret Kohanim, for the people in Israel, we're trying to raise another level of the next priests in case we ever get a temple, in order to make sure that the young people are okay to become priests. They're raising children they've done it for years, where they don't actually come in contact with the ground. They literally are walking on like pallets. They're never on the ground, so that they never become in contact with the ground and going over. Now, not in your house. When you're in your house, you don't have to walk on a pallet. But when they go outside, they have to be only on the pallet. Unless, again, they've excavated the land and know for a fact that there's never been bodies buried there. So, yeah, it's a serious issue for these people, and they don't want anyone to be ritually impure. Because the problem is, the only way to purify someone once they've come into contact with the dead is to perform the ritual of the red heifer, which we haven't gotten to yet, but some of you remember it from Parshat Hukat, right? The red heifer law. That law is that you have to find a perfectly red cow and kill it and burn it and get its ashes and mix it with water and then purify a priest with it. Well, why do you have to do that? You have to do that because the priest came in contact with a dead body. If the priest never came into contact with a dead body, don't have to do it. So their argument is if they can raise priests that are ready to go, then they could not.
You can't find a red heifer these days.
Yeah, well, they're trying to do that too. They're trying to genetically engineer the red heifer.
Paint it.
Like, they can't paint it, Mike, but they have to raise it. And there are people who are doing that. They're spending millions of dollars creating the red heifer too. They're genetically engineering a perfectly red cow. They can get that, then they don't have to worry about the kids coming into contact.
But what would
So
the
again-
rabbi say about
What?
that? Being
Genetically engineered? Like they basically be saying that they're only using cows, so they're not genetically engineering it. They're genetically selecting. It's genetic selection. It's not really engineering. Well, it is engineering, but it's not genetic mutation. It's not genetic recombination. Well, it's not interspecies recombination. Anyways, it would be okay. Obviously someone's allowing this. These are rabbinic authorities that are allowing this to happen. But yeah, there are people who take this very seriously right now. But again, this is an important. I'll tell you another relevant law from this is that priests who are Orthodox will not come into contact with dead people that are not their immediate family. You saw they can go to their father or mother or siblings or sister before she gets married funerals, but other than that, they can't. So they can't go to a funeral. Well, let me tell you. So what happens if you're a rabbi and you're a Kohen?
You can't do anything.
Tracy's rabbi in England growing up was a Kohen. Jeffrey Cohen, very prominent rabbi, was
So
in the short list to be chief rabbi of England, actually. So what did this man do? He's a Cohen. Everyone knows he's a Cohen. His name is Jeffrey Cohen. Thank God he's still alive. He's a wonderful guy. I've met him. What do you do? What do you do?
Tell us that.
No. It's got to do funerals.
I'll go first.
Got to do a funeral. Got to do a funeral. So what do they do? What?
Maybe they covered him and they
They
actually.
cover him.
They covered him already.
No, what they do is they allow him to come into the chapel. They do not have the body in front of him
Uh-huh.
when he's in the chapel.
Okay.
And he does the service in the chapel and he never goes up to the gravesite. He can never do Kaddish. He can never do any of those prayers with the family once they go up. But he can do the eulogies and he can do the chapel service. And that's what he's done for 50 years. The coffin isn't there. So people have to know that if he's going to do the service, the coffin can't be there. Keep it in a different place. So he's not in front of the body.
It's on the grounds of the cemetery.
Chapel's on the grounds of the cemetery, but it's done in a way. And if you notice, it's also done this way at Mount Sinai. And it is also at Eden. One of the chapels
Right.
is right when you come in.
Not Shalom.
Not Shalom and not
That either, right? Been a long time.
no, Hillside is, you
Is
can
there
too.
one?
Yeah. The chapel is before you go into the cemetery. So most cemeteries was not an issue in California, even though they don't have a lot of Orthodox folks, they did build them that way. And that allowed people not to go into the cemetery and still be able to go into the chapel and not be there. Look, in New York, Chicago, Minnesota, a lot of states that I've been to for funerals, it's not an issue because the chapel isn't even on the grounds of the cemetery. Detroit, right? In Michigan. So it's very strange because in California, I always grew up, I thought the mortuaries, the chapels were always at the cemeteries.
No, when I was a kid.
Not in New York.
I remember being in processions going to.
Yeah.
From the chapel.
Or the synagogue, right? So if it's at the synagogue, obviously it's no issue at all, as long as the body's not there, or if the body's not in front of you. So if the body's in the car and isn't in the synagogue, it's not an issue. Anyways, this is how people have dealt with this for years. And so it wasn't an issue if the family was Orthodox or or a Kohanim, and felt that this law was something that they had to follow. But yeah, it can be tough. I mean, especially again for rabbis or people. Well, obviously, you couldn't be a funeral director if you were a Kohen, but yeah, it's not easy. So it is relevant to people who follow this law. I mean, they take it seriously. You shall not defile himself as kinsman by marriage and so profane himself. So can't go to his spouse's family for their funerals. So, yeah. Now, this part we read about last week or 2 weeks ago in Kedoshim. You shall not shave, and this is a little different from there, is you shall not shave any part of the heads or cut the side growth of the beards or make gashes in the flesh. So there it doesn't say anything about Ani Adonai Elohechem, that they can't put the words I am God in your
What do you mean by gash?
that's a question, right?
No, earrings are all right here. They're just not all right here. I'm being serious.
We talked about
Yeah.
that. So look at the note. Oh, that's just about, here it is. This is stated in addition to the law of Leviticus 19, which is the one we read 2 weeks ago, or whatever, Kedoshim, for the following reason, because it is said of the ordinary Israelites, and you shall not make a cutting in your flesh for the dead. I might think if one made 5 incisions at the same time, he was liable to the punishment of lashes only once. Scripture therefore states they shall not incise an incision to make one liable for each and every incision. For this word would be redundant, and it basically is saying you get lashes if you cut yourself. You don't get killed. That's basically the Rashi text on there. Look, here it says in the context of making gashes, doesn't say here specifically for the dead. In the other line I'll just show you real quick. In the other line in Leviticus, it says, you shall not make gashes in your flesh for the dead or incise any marks on yourself. I am Adonai. So that's the law we talked about of tattooing. This one seems to be gashes. This one seems to be specifically making gashes. So, this is also about cutting the side growth again we talked about, or the allowing the payas to grow. But again, cutting the side growth of their beards. What if they don't have a beard? There's Orthodox Jews who follow halakha and believe that you can shave and not be doing this. What they believe is that what we're talking about here are specifically pagan practices where people would kind of cut the sides of their beard on the sides and like leave those shaved and then let the other part grow, which would be, the understanding is that's what the Canaanites did. That was the Canaanite style of beard keeping. So if you don't have a beard at all, you're not breaking the rule, because for the most part, the Canaanites didn't completely shave. So what they're really talking about here again is not behaving like the Canaanites, not behaving like those people. And it says they shall be holy to their God and not profane the name of their God, for they offer Adonai's offerings by fire, the food of their God, and so must be holy. So this seems to, again, be talking about the priests not doing this as well. That maybe in this context here, this is just about the priests, because it kind of seems to still only be for the priests. But we heard that the Israelites are not supposed to do it either. So, it's not really any different from what we've already heard when it comes to the gashing part and the not cutting part. But again, this all seems to be, these first 6 verses all seem to be with the priests, as well as this next line too. All right, so everyone with us so far? So it's a little different than the Leviticus 19 line about the gashes, because it also here doesn't say about incisions or markings. Here it doesn't say markings, but all right. More stuff for priests. They shall not take into their household as their wife a woman defiled by harlotry, nor shall they take one divorced from her husband. for they are holy to their God, and you must treat them as holy, since they offer the food of your God. They shall be holy to you, for I, Adonai, who sanctify you, am holy. So, the first part, you're going, okay, the priest is not allowed to marry a prostitute. Okay. Would be considered probably a difficult marriage from the standpoint of the guy's supposed to be offering up stuff. By the way, it doesn't say that other people can't marry someone who is a harlot. Didn't say that earlier. It said, we read a week ago that you're not supposed to have your daughter go into harlotry, but it doesn't say about marrying somebody who's a harlot. As a matter of fact, there's a story in the Bible of Hosea, the prophet Hosea, who is told to marry a woman who was a harlot. So here it says the priest isn't allowed to marry a harlot, but it's not just the harlot, it's anyone who's divorced. This law is still relevant to those who follow the Torah literally, Orthodox Jews included, even somewhat modern Orthodox Jews, who believe that Kohanim cannot marry, even to this day, even though they're not offering sacrifices, even though no one really is asking them to offer up sacrifices, that they're not allowed to marry a divorcee. Now, the man can be divorced, but the woman can't be divorced.
Of course.
So what's this about? Why can someone not marry a divorcee? Why can't they marry someone who was a harlot? What? And they were going to make absolutely certain that the children that the woman had,
Doesn't say anything about children.
I know it doesn't say anything, but the logic was that if the priest is only marrying someone who has never had sex before, that the kids are his.
True.
The priests were very concerned, and you could say God was concerned, the Torah is concerned, whatever you want to say, were very concerned that priests were priests, that there were no illegitimate priests sneaking into the bloodline. And for them, it was a bloodline issue. Now, today you would say, well, there's a cooling off period, a waiting period. If a woman hasn't been married to a guy for a few months, definitely a year, there's nothing rattling around in there that's going to give the mother the wrong kid. They didn't know that back then. They were not 100% sure.
They should have done what my father said.
What?
Children should be named after the mother. You always know who the mother is, but you don't always know.
Well, that's the logic of why Judaism started following matrilineal descent and not patrilineal descent. But even with that, they weren't 100% sure of the biology here, because priesthood is patrilineal, it's not matrilineal. They had to make sure that the priest was marrying someone who was not going to give them a kid from a different person. And so this was the logic to it, which is a woman could not have been married before. And that's the reason. That was the logic to it. So that the priests, anyone who's offering the food for God, the sacrifices, was doing it because they were legitimate priests. They were descendant of Aaron. Every one of these priests had to be a descendant of Aaron. Could not be adopted. He could not be brought in by his father, his stepfather, adopted him and took care of him, whatever. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how well-intentioned they are. They had to be descendant of Aaron. They had to come from Aaron's line. It was very important. I got news for you. It worked. It worked. That's how we have a Kohanic gene today. We know who are Jews. We know who are Kohanim by testing the Kohanic gene. One of the ways that we determine a population had Jewish ancestry is by testing the population and seeing how many of them have the Kohanic gene. If a substantial enough of a population, so let's say Ethiopian Jews came forward and said, we believe we're Jewish. They tested them. They didn't find the Kohanic gene. Didn't matter. We didn't say they weren't Jewish, but the DNA didn't prove they were Jewish. There are other groups, the Lemba of South Africa, or even further south. Turned out they do have the Kohanic gene. No one's really sure how. They claim to be Jewish. Turns out the DNA actually shows that they're Jewish. And they're further south than the Ethiopians. So it wasn't like a racial thing. It wasn't an ethnic thing. It wasn't even a geographical thing. There's DNA. The DNA doesn't lie. So we can take a group of people, test their DNA, and if it turns out they have the Kohanic gene, like the Palestinians, turns out, yeah, they were Jewish at one time. That's not a big surprise. They lived in, if they don't want to hear it, but if they lived in the land of Israel for 2,000 years, if their families were not Arab immigrants to that country, which a lot of them are, but they're mixed. It's an admixture of Arabs too, obviously in Israel, with the Palestinians, but there's a lot of Kohanic genes going around there. So we know from that who's Jewish. It's one of the DNA factors. So it worked. This worked. Now, we took it to an extreme because, again, we didn't know enough about the DNA back then. Say a woman hasn't been married to her husband for 9 months, 10 months. She has a baby. It's going to be the baby. It's going to be the Kohen, but they didn't want to take a chance. So this is important, folks. There are people who are Kohanim who are denied the ability to marry the woman that they want because they're not allowed to marry a divorcee. Look, you can say what you want about it. It's not, I don't follow it. You don't have to worry about me, but heck, we're not the only people who follow this rule. Edward VIII stopped being King of England so he could marry a divorcee. They didn't want Charles to marry a divorcee that he loved for a long time. He did anyways, but he did it after he was beyond childbearing years, and she was out of childbearing years. But that was a big issue. Where's that come from? Comes from this. Comes from the same logic, which is we don't want the bloodlines tainted by having somebody who's not from the bloodline. So is it fair? Maybe not, but that's where it comes from. So look, there's a very famous rabbi from Los Angeles who moved to England. He got divorced. He married a divorced woman. And he was probably in his 60s when it happened. So he was married for a long time, got divorced, married another woman, married a different woman who was also divorced. When he went to the synagogue in England, he went to an Orthodox synagogue, and he was an Orthodox rabbi here in LA, the biggest synagogue in the biggest Orthodox synagogue in LA, the one in Beverly Hills, that's Beth Jacob, sorry. And he went there, he was there for many years. He went to England to be a rabbi at Orthodox synagogue in England, and he married this divorcee. And the synagogue in England fired him because they said he was married to a divorcee and he was a Kohen. He was violating the law. It was a major job. It was a big, big position. And his argument was, well, he didn't even argue, hey, I'm not having any kids. She's not having any kids. His argument was, he actually fell back on this argument that he's not 100% sure that his family were Kohanim. And he's willing to say he's not a Kohen. He said, I don't care, I'm not a Kohen. Say that I'm not a Kohen. They wouldn't do it. They said, your whole life you've been a Kohen. Can't now claim you're not a Kohen. So he lost his job. It's a real story. So this does play out for people. And there are people who are Orthodox today who get divorced and they're in their 50s or 60s. And they want to get remarried. And their families, or maybe they feel they can't get married unless they marry somebody who's never been married before. Because they're not going to be a Kohen, they're not going to be a priest, they're not a rabbi, they're not just a real estate agent or a doctor or whatever. But they can't marry a divorcee. This really plays out for people. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that every year it happens to hundreds of people in Israel and other places in America. I know people, just average people, who couldn't get married because their family said, you can't get married. You're
The
divorced.
rabbi,
She's divorced. Yeah.
what about if they're widow or widower?
That's a good question.
What did she say?
What if they're widowed? You want to know that? You want to know? No. And I'm going to show you something right here. Let's see. Right here. There's Rashi's. A person whose mother was a widow and then married somebody who was a priest, that child of that union would be illegitimate. We have a word for that in Hebrew. You know what the word is?
What was it?
Mamzer.
Well, mamzer literally is a bastard. So we use the word as a pejorative in Yiddish. You say someone's a mamzer, right? They're a bastard, but it's also like that person's a mamzer. You know, he's a real mamzer. It's not a good thing. Some people say it in a joking way, but in Hebrew, it's a real thing. It's a real word. It is a real status of somebody who was born of an illegitimate marriage. This would have been an illegitimate marriage. So yeah, for widows as well. It's a real issue. I mean, people fall in love with people that they love. And there are people who can't get married because of that. It's one of the reasons why some people will not get married. They'll just live together, or they won't officially get married. They don't want to break the rule. But it's very hard. You can't just say, I'm not a priest anymore. That's who you are. That's your genetics. That's your identity. That's your caste, if you will. And that's one of the responsibilities and one of the challenges that comes with it. So it's really hard, for people who are in their 50s or 60s that don't want to marry a 20-year-old and say, hey, I want to follow the rule, or again, they're, God forbid, they're a widower, and they're like, what do I do now? So people go, oh, that's creepy. He's marrying a woman 30 years younger. Well, if he's following the law, he's actually got a problem. He can't really marry anybody but. Anyways. Yep. So when the daughter of a priest defiles herself through harlotry, it is her father whom she defiles. She shall be put to the fire. Well, that's pretty serious. That's pretty much like those honor killings that you hear about. The priest who is exalted above his fellows and whose head the anointing oil has been poured and who has been ordained to wear the vestment shall not bare his head or rend his vestments. He shall not go in where there is any dead body. He shall not defile himself even for his father and his mother. Whoa. So this is an even higher level, which is for the high priest. For the high priest, he is not even allowed to go into the cemetery for his own family. And we kind of saw that with the story of Aaron when his sons Nadav and Abihu were killed. Moses, God says to him, tells Moses, tell your brother he can't do anything. He can't do kriya. He can't cut his clothes. He can't mourn. Pretty serious situation. He shall not go outside of the sanctuary and profane the sanctuary of his God, for upon him is the distinction of the anointing oil of his God. Mine, Adonai's, Ani Adonai. And here's the line in particular, Glory. It's going to make it clear. Well, this line and the line below. He may take into his household as his wife only a woman who is a virgin. Now, this seems to be about the high priest himself. But it also says right here, a widow or a divorced woman or one who is degraded by harlotry, such he may not take. Only a virgin of his own kin may he take as his wife, that he may not profane his offspring among his kin. For I, Adonai, have sanctified him. And that basically says that priests are only allowed to marry women who are from the priesthood. They're not even allowed to marry women outside of the Kohanim. And here it's pretty strict. A widow or a divorced woman. So it's pretty strict to keep that Kohanic line together. Now, you could guess that this would be somewhat genetically problematic. But now, by the time that Aaron is around, remember, there are Levites maybe that would have been okay, including Moses's family and the other people like Korah and the other people that were part of the Levitical tribe that might have been okay for him at that point. But eventually there's millions, but hundreds of thousands of Kohanim, so it's not as crazy, but they were pretty clear that the bloodline cannot be mixed up. But these laws, again, we're talking about priests. These are not for everybody else. Other people can marry widows and people who are not virgins. It wasn't everybody. It's for the priests. Now we're going to get to a law that you will really not like. Adonai spoke further to Moses. Speak to Aaron and say, no man of your offspring throughout the ages who has a defect shall be qualified to offer the food of his God. No one at all who has a defect shall be qualified. No man who is blind or lame or has a limb too short or too long. No man who has a broken leg or broken arm or who is a hunchback or a dwarf or who has a growth in his eye or a boil scar or scurvy or crushed testes. No man among the offspring of Aaron, the priest, who has a defect shall be qualified to offer Adonai's offering by fire. Having a defect, he shall not be qualified to offer the food of his God. Now, well, I'll show you the good part of it, but the bad part is that does not go along with our sensibilities of making sure that people with all types of, we don't even call them disabilities anymore.
Handicapped.
You don't say handicaps either.
Okay.
Definitely don't say handicaps. Challenges. We can't even wrap our heads around this today. Makes our heads explode. How do we read this today without feeling offended by the fact that this is discriminatory?
It sounds like Hitler.
Well, it sounds like lots of people, Joanne, who make determinations of someone's physical fitness in order to confer responsibility and leadership on them. And I'll just throw out for you, for some examples, have you ever noticed that the only people who get elected president of the United States are taller than most people? Did you ever notice that? Did you ever notice that people with any kind of infirmity or disability or physical challenge doesn't get elected to high positions of power?
That's why,
Yeah, Roosevelt.
Roosevelt,
Yeah, did you know that Roosevelt wouldn't let people see him in his wheelchair?
Yes.
until it was when he was on the stage.
It was too late.
Yeah.
By the end of his life. So I don't know that we're a whole lot different when it comes to the people that we want to put in charge in front of us.
I think John Adams was the shortest president we've ever had.
Yeah, I think only the presidents that, again, were around before there was television. 6'5" or 6'4", or something like that. Yeah, people, there's a reason why we don't see a lot of people with any type of physical challenge on television. We don't know what to do with it. Makes us feel uncomfortable. We don't want to see it.
They do a lot of the deaf. Deaf, there's many programs with deaf people in them. And
I think they're doing it more than ever.
Yeah, but there aren't many actors and actresses who
Yeah,
are
the
deaf.
actress is actually deaf.
I understand, but there's not many of them.
No. It's a choice if they want to become an actress. Right?
So it's I don't know that we're that different. So, we like to say we're different. We try to be a little bit more sensitive, but in reality, we don't really want to see it. So how do I know? Because I watched the Academy Awards, and I actually don't watch them anymore, but I don't watch the SAG Awards or the other, but people on those awards seem to be pretty good physical specimens. It seems like they're almost disproportionately kinds of people that you don't see every day. So I don't know that we're that much different. We expect the people to be good actors and actresses. We expect them to be talented. We expect them to be good singers. We expect them to be good athletes or whatever else they are supposed to be doing. But we really don't want to see people who don't look a certain way. Look, I will tell you, they've talked about it in the past. There are football teams that will only draft a certain kind of person to be their quarterback because they want someone who looks good when their helmet's off. There's a reason why all these people look the way they do. So I don't know that we're a whole lot different. We try to say we're not. And again, we get upset with this because the Torah seems to be encouraging this. It seems to be solidifying this type of behavior.
These people that could not act as priests, but they were fed.
Well, that's what we're going to get to, the good part, right? The good part, the nice part, the part that makes us feel good is that it says, he may eat of the food of the God, of his God, for of the most holy as well as of the holy, but he shall not enter behind the curtain or come near the altar, for he has a defect. You shall not profane these places sacred to me, for I Adonai have sanctified them. So, it's a weird thing because some of these things maybe were, broken arm, broken leg. That's something that probably somebody, they fell down or they got in a fight or whatever. They wound up hurting themselves. That may be on them. But God made them this way. The argument would be for a lot of these things, God made them that way. So God, have sanctified them? Yeah, you also created these people. So how can you create somebody who's not fit to come before you? Why are you saying this, God? So a lot of people, have a difficulty reading this today and saying, what is this about? And it's one of the more problematic parts of the Torah, actually, for people. There's a couple places where people go, God, this makes me feel uncomfortable. The commandment to kill an Amalekite if they come into your, like if you see an Amalekite, you have to kill them. It's a mitzvah. If an Amalekite comes into the room right now, I have to kill them. That's literally the mitzvah. I have to, I'm not going to, but if there are no Amalekites anymore, but if the person self-identified as Amalek, I'm responsible to kill them. That's a mitzvah. As much as any other mitzvah in the Torah, I have to do it. So people look at these laws a couple times and they say, this doesn't make me feel very comfortable. So, part of it is moot. Part of the answer is what difference does it make? There's no priests anymore. No one's offering sacrifices. But for the people who say, yeah, but there was a time 2,000 years ago where people offered sacrifices, and this seems discriminatory. So this isn't fair. Well, again, part of what I would say is are we much better ourselves? Have we gotten to a point where we can honestly say,
No.
they're wrong? Because I got news for you. I think it'd be pretty hypocritical for us to say, we're much better than they are. I haven't seen it. There's not enough evidence yet for me to say we've come a long way. So maybe we will one day, but right now we don't. And again, we don't do this anymore, so it's not an issue. There's a very famous story. Actually, Josephus tells it, the story in his History of the Jews. We wouldn't have known about it because the rabbis didn't write about it. But there's a scene in Josephus's history of the priesthood and of the kings of the Maccabees, who were both priests and kings, that there were two brothers that were fighting against each other. One of them's name was John Hyrcanus, and the other's name was Judas Aristobulus. And they were fighting against each other, and they both wanted to be kings, and they were brothers. And John took his brother Judas and cut off his ear when he took back the priesthood to make sure that he could never be priest again. Because he knew that a brother with a cut off ear can no longer be priest. Now you can make the argument that's pretty horrible, but he could have killed him. But he didn't kill him. He just made sure he could never be priest again. So he never had to worry about his brother taking away the priesthood from him. He knew the Torah. He knew the Torah law would make it so he couldn't do it anymore. So that is a real life or a real historic version of how someone got disqualified from the priesthood. That's a pretty bad story of the Maccabees, but it shows you how they degenerated to that level. But there was a lot of money behind the priesthood. And so these people, like the money that people get today to be a quarterback of a football team, they don't want to be disqualified. They want to look good. We want them to look good. So that's the rule. That is for priests. It's not for rabbis. It's not for people who sing in services like a cantor or a Baal, the person who read from the Torah. Though I will tell you, we don't see a lot of rabbis with physical disabilities, do you? Or priests, or clergy people.
There's a very famous rock star who was born without an ear.
Mm-hmm.
Named Paul Stanley of Kiss.
Yeah,
He only recently came out and admitted it.
I heard him talking about it today.
Yeah, and there's a documentary now too.
Yeah.
But even Gene Simmons, who's been with him for 50 years, did not know he didn't have one ear.
Yeah, Paul Stanley, by the way, is Jewish. Is Jewish.
Gene Simmons.
Is Jewish. I know they're both Jewish, but Paul Stanley, yes, had his ear rebuilt though. He talked about how he had his ear rebuilt, but yeah, it made him feel very, very. He felt very bad about it. He had bad self-image because he didn't have an ear. He couldn't hear it. He can't hear out of that ear, obviously. But anyways, yeah, the deformity that he said it was a big thing for him. He had to overcome it. He said that's one of the reasons why he probably became a musician, because he wanted to have attention. Anyways, he said it's not normal because no one becomes a musician. I heard him just say it today. It's interesting he said that, but yes. But there are, but he couldn't tell anybody. Couldn't tell anybody. Yep. So they can eat from the stuff, but they can't offer it. Moses spoke to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites. And that's the end of that chapter. But then it goes into Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, continues, all other laws for the priests. Instruct Aaron and his sons to be scrupulous about the sacred donations that the Israelite people consecrate to me, lest they profane my holy name. Mine, Adonai's, Adonai. Don't mess up. Don't mess up. Be careful, right? Say to them throughout the ages, if any man among your offspring, while in a state of impurity, partakes of any sacred donation that the Israelite people may consecrate to Adonai, that person shall be cut off from me, before me. I am Adonai. So if the guy screws up and he's in a state of tameh, if he's impure, right, and he offers up a sacrifice in his state of tameh, if he's impure, he's cut off. It doesn't say he's killed. It says he's karet. He's excommunicated. He's cut off. It's pretty serious. No man of Aaron's offspring who has an eruption or a discharge shall eat of the sacred donation until he is pure. if one touches anything made impure by a corpse, or if a man has an emission of semen, or if a man touches any swarming thing by which he is made impure, or any human being by him who he is made, whom he has made impure, whatever is impurity, the person who touches shall be impure until evening, and shall not eat of the sacred donations unless he has washed his body in water. So again, this is a serious issue of making sure the person who's tame, and again, impure and pure, we use those words tahor and tame. We've talked about them before, and we talked about leprosy and those kinds of diseases, skin diseases. These are states of, again, purity and impurity, clean or unclean. That's probably the way the translation you've got there in front of you in the King James. Is it clean and unclean, Mary? Yeah, so it's not a bad way of reading it. Impure and pure seem to, I think, convey a state of like goodness or badness. It's really a state of being just not fit. You're not clean. You've been made unclean, which like almost like you could say somebody's impure and then they're made pure, but it almost seems like that's like too strong of a word. If you clean up after you're unclean and you're clean now, it seems like something you do every day. But impure and pure almost seems like you can't just be impure and then all of a sudden be pure. So the word in English, I think purity conveys something a little bit more than just clean. Maybe clean isn't strong enough. Maybe that's why they chose the word pure and impure for tame. But it's a pretty serious issue. And you can, of course, be pure by washing and also allowing time. As soon as the sun sets, he shall be pure, and afterward he may eat of the sacred donations, for they are his food. Okay, that makes sense. He shall not eat anything that died or was torn by beasts, what we call trefa, trafe. That's what the word trafe means. We've talked about it before when we talked about animals. Trefa means literally torn. It doesn't mean unkosher. It literally, it means, we use it for the word anything unkosher we say now is trafe. But literally trafe is torn. The Hebrew word for it is torn. Okay? Thereby becoming impure, I am Adonai. They shall keep my charge, lest they incur guilt thereby and die for it. Having committed profanation, I, Adonai, consecrate them. So I'm going to make sure that they can be holy again. No layperson shall eat of the sacred donations. No bound or hired laborer of a priest shall eat of the sacred donations. But a person who is a priest's property by purchase may eat of them. And those that are born into his household may eat of his food. Now that's weird, because if he's working for the person, he can't eat of it. But if he's owned as a slave by them, he can. He can eat of the donations. So it's interesting that, like, when someone becomes a slave of yours, they're almost at a higher level than the person who works for you. There is this interesting idea in Judaism when it comes to slavery, that when you purchased somebody, when you literally brought them into your house as a purchase, that they became like one of your children, which is completely different than the understanding that we'd have today of like a slave being chattel slavery, which it was, you treat them like an animal. The Bible actually kind of gives us an idea, and you can see it even here, that the person literally is like part of your house. They're not a worker for you. They're literally like another level. Again, wasn't always necessarily like, you'd think that's it's kind of by our standards kind of tough, but we read about it from the beginning with Abraham. It says he brought these people into their house. He made them, he purchased them, but the rabbis understand that as he didn't purchase these people, he didn't make them slaves. He literally made them Jews. Now, the interesting thing about that is once they're Jewish, they're no longer slaves. So do the people who you bring into your house eventually become like part of your family? Seems like that's the case with Abraham and his servant, his slave Eliezer, who becomes like his own son. So May not exactly be what you expected when it comes to slavery, but that seems to be what the Torah says. And the Talmud goes into it as well, which also says that if you have a slave, you have to make sure your slave is fed before you're eaten. Kind of weird. But the Talmud says that, and it kind of discourages people from having slaves because it says you better make sure that that slave that you have is well fed, has a bed, has everything that they need to have as a person. You can't bring them in and think that they're your animal or something like that. You have to actually, according to the Talmud, also you have to treat these people again with dignity and with a certain level of, again, if the Talmud says you have to feed them before you feed yourself, not exactly what you'd think. I'm not encouraging slavery, but I'm just telling you it may not be exactly what you thought it was, at least according to Judaism. There were slave owners who were Jewish in the South. We know that. There weren't a lot of them. And one of the reasons why slavery was difficult for Jews to manage was because this idea that if they converted to Judaism, they went free. They go free. You can't have a slave who's a Jew as a Jew. You're not allowed to. So if your slave decided they want to become Jewish, you essentially have to free them. I mean, they can't be your slave anymore. I mean, they could work for you. They could live with you. I don't know. It's kind of dissuading people from investing money in buying a slave. Definitely was one of the reasons why Jews didn't convert their slaves to Judaism. You always wondered, like why, if there were slaves that were owned by Jewish people, why didn't they convert to Judaism? That's why. Jewish slave owners would have had to free them once they were Jewish. So Judah Benjamin owned hundreds of slaves in the South. But he didn't convert into Judaism. That's what it says. If a priest's daughter becomes a layman's wife, meaning not a priest, not a Kohen anymore, she may not eat of the sacred gifts. But if the priest's daughter is widowed or divorced and without offspring, and is back in her father's house as in her youth, she may eat of her father's food. No lay person may eat of it, but if any such party eats of a sacred donation unwittingly, the priest shall be paid for the sacred donation, adding 1/5 of its value. So there's a punishment of 20% if you unwittingly allowed somebody to eat of the priestly donations. This is not the food that the priest had around his table. These are the sacrifices that were set aside for the priests to eat. He could give the people other food from his table. It's not like every food that he had. These are the sacred donations. These were things that people gave to the priest to offer to God, and the priest, as you read before, got to keep some of the best parts of the meat himself. Those are the things that he can't give to other people. Okay? So a bat kohen, a daughter of a priest, is allowed to eat the food if she doesn't have any other food. She can eat that food. It says right here. But the priests must not allow Israelites to profane the sacred donations that they set aside for Adonai, or to incur guilt requiring a penalty payment by eating such sacred donations, for it is I, Adonai, who make them sacred. So again, you can't have everybody eating from the sacred offerings because those were for God and for the priests. So you can't do that. You can't just give it to people and say, hey, oh, well, excuse me, we'll pay a penalty for it. No, you can't do it. All right, these are all laws just for the priests. Okay? It says so. It's for all the priests. It's not other people. This only applies to priests. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to Aaron and his sons and to all, and this one says, and to all the Israelite people. So now this is moving away from that. And say to them, when any person of the house of Israel or of the strangers in Israel presents a burnt offering as the offering for any of the votive or any of the free will offerings that they offered Adonai, It must, to be acceptable in your favor, be a male without blemish from cattle, sheep, or goats. And so again, this has to do with the priests, but it has to do with all the things that the people are offering to the priests. You shall not offer any that has a defect, for it will not be accepted in your favor. And when any party offers from the herd or the flock a sacrifice of well-being to Adonai for an explicit vow or as a free will offering, we read about these. These are neder, these are vow offerings, or they are nedava, the nedava offerings, the free will offerings, or no, just those two offerings here. Again, they have to be without blemish, no defect. Anything,
Parallel here.
oh, with the
The
priests
offerings had to be
Pri-
blemish-free.
and the people.
Priests had to be blemish-free.
Exactly. Anything blind or injured or maimed or with a wen or a boil scar or scurvy, such you shall not offer to Adonai. You shall not put any of them on the altar as offerings by fire to Adonai. So those, pretty clear. Now it says, you may, however, present as a free will offering an ox or a sheep with a limb extended or contracted, but it will not be accepted for a vow. You shall not offer to Adonai anything with its testes bruised or crushed or torn or cut. You shall have no practices in your own land, nor shall you accept any offers, any animals from foreigner for offering as food for your God, for they are mutilated, they have a defect, they shall not be accepted in your favor. So there are certain offerings that can have certain defects in them. It says only, right? Only these ones which have an extended limb or a shrunken limb, those can be for the nadava. You can use those for a free will offering, just giving it because of your own free will, but not if you made a vow, not if you did a neder, not if you did a vow offering, something that you promised that you were going to do. If it was a free will offering, you're just bringing it because you're feeling good. There's nothing that you're specifically had to bring it for any reason. Those you can bring with this minor difference, some kind of defect, but not for vow offerings. And again, any of these other things can't be for any offering. Okay. Here's an interesting law about sacrifices. And again, some of these are, the priests have to do this, or it's for the priests, or it's on the priest, but all of this has to do with the offerings. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, when an ox or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall stay 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day on, it shall be acceptable as an offering by fire to Adonai. So you cannot offer a little tiny baby animal. You have to wait for the 8th day. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because what do we do on Yom Shmini? A brit milah. Circumcision is done on the 8th day. For a similar reason. It's considered, again, now a viable living being and made it through its first week of life. As it comes back onto its 8th day, 1 week plus a day, it now can be offered. A similar idea. It's now a viable animal. It's now a viable person. There is a theory that we waited for 8 days because after the 8th day, the chance of mortality for the child went down considerably. After the 8th day, if a child can make it to the 8th day, good chance they're going to make it. Not the first few days. So, probably a similar idea. They didn't want to give an animal that was really not healthy. It's kind of sad because kill an animal when it was 8 days old, but here's an interesting law. No, however, no animal from the herd or from the flock shall be slaughtered on the same day with its young. That's an interesting law. You can't kill an animal and its mother or father the same day. That's just doesn't seem right. So they didn't do it. Similar to the don't boil a kid in its mother's milk.
Yes.
This seems to be a little bit close to that too. That just doesn't seem right. There's like a limit to what like people are willing to do when it comes to killing an animal. When you sacrifice a Thanksgiving offering to Adonai, this is a different kind of offering. This is a todah. This is a Thanksgiving offering. Sacrifice it so that it may be acceptable in your favor. It may be eaten on the same day. You shall not leave any of it until morning. I am Adonai. So a Thanksgiving offering has to be eaten right away. You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I am Adonai. You shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. I, Adonai, who sanctify you. I, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ani Adonai. Over and over again. Ani Adonai. I'm God. So that's the end of 21 and 22. These laws that are really about the priests. There's some other stuff. I mean, obviously, the people have to know the laws. They need to know what kind of animals they can bring. They need to know the laws apply to them to some extent. But those laws were really about the priests, not chapter 23. And this is the part that we're going to finish with today, which is one of my favorite chapters to look at in Leviticus, because like the laws of kashrut, which we read about 12 chapters ago, this chapter is about the holidays. And this is the line that tells us about it. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, these are my fixed times, the fixed times of Adonai, which you shall proclaim as sacred occasions. We call these Moadeh, or Moadeh Adonai, right? Or Hem Moadai. These are my sacred occasions. These are my fixed times. These are the holidays. And this is where we get the word Moed from, right? Here's the times. And this is the list of the holidays. Let's see how the Bible throws out our holidays. How does it roll out our holidays? Well, let's look at the first holiday. First holiday? On 6 days, work may be done, but on the seventh day, there shall be a Shabbat of complete rest, a sacred occasion. You shall do no work. It shall be a Sabbath of Adonai throughout your settlements. That is the first holiday mentioned. This is a holiday which happens every week. That's the first, Shabbat. And it says it's a day of rest, Shabbat, Shabbaton. It's a Mikra Kodesh. It's a sacred occasion. And of course, it says you don't do any work on it. So that happens every week. It's a fixed time in the sense that it happens every week, but there is a recognition that that sets it apart from everything else. Because the next line says, these are the set times of Adonai, the sacred occasions which you shall celebrate at its appointed time. So these are appointed times. These are times that are not every week. These are times that happen once a year. Well, let's take a look. So the first holiday we had is the one that we have every week, Shabbat. The next holiday, you could probably guess, is the most important holiday in the Torah besides Shabbat. It's the one we've already read about in the book of Exodus. And it says in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, there shall be a Passover offering to Adonai. And on the 15th day of the month, Adonai's feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. Now, what did we just read about? What holiday did we just read of? Passover, right? Seems pretty obvious. Does anybody celebrate Passover like this today? Well, we don't do a Passover offering. But did you just notice what the Torah just said? Somebody tell me what the Torah just said.
In the first month, isn't the first month September, October?
Right. So that's not the way we do it anymore. So Harvey just knocked out one right away, which is, yeah, in the Bible, the first month was the month of Nisan. It was the month of springtime. It was only later on during the Babylonian experience that we started keeping the first month as the month of Tishrei, 6 months later. It's literally a whole different time of year. It's the exact opposite time of year. This is the spring equinox, which, by the way, is only, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Passover is only 5 weeks from now. It's true. It's 1 month from Purim. It's April 5th this year. Harvey, is Sharon nearby?
Hold on. Sharon? Rabbi wants you. She's
In
coming.
honor of Passover, I want to announce to you where I believe Passover, I think I nailed down where Passover is going to be this year, just today. Well, it's only 5 weeks away, so it needed to be nailed down. Sharon, guess where Passover is probably going to be this year?
Senior Center.
Why?
Because you said Sharon, so.
Gave it away. Joanne's too smart.
Center,
Joanne,
Oh,
Joanne, you
very nice.
very good.
declimaticize the, it's okay, yes, Joanne, but it's not a bad place to have it, right, Joanne? Be a wonderful place to have it, which is the senior center. We wanted to be as close to the Schwartzes as possible.
Are you having it in the banquet hall?
And hunt for the matzah.
So we're working,
Be there, but yeah. We won't.
so Passover is probably, I'm 90% sure going to be there today. I kind of formalized it today. So
Very
with
good.
with your friend Kevin McDonald. So yes, it looks like we're going to be doing it there. They're doing, they're working on a very generous situation with us to do it. Of course, we're also going to be doing something very special we've done over the last couple of years. We're going to be providing Passover for all the seniors who request it. They'll be able to get Passover the last couple of years. So we're going to do it again. But this year we're working
Wow.
more cooperatively and going to use their kitchen to prepare it in their dining room. Yeah. So it looks like
Oh
that's
my
where it's going to be.
God.
So what did you say, Sharon?
It's wonderful. You're gonna be in the
I
main.
know, but we're gonna miss Sharon was there every day. Used to be there every day.
So you're gonna be in the banquet hall?
Wait, what?
They'll be setting up chairs in the normal banquet hall?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
Very
we're gonna do
nice.
the second night Seder there, and we're also gonna then prepare, obviously, the Seder plates that we've been giving out. And it's the Petries who donated the money so we could do that. So it's a really wonderful thing we started doing, and we're gonna do it and grow with that again this year. So yeah, so Harvey, you pointed out this beautiful, weird thing that
Interesting to see.
we used to celebrate the holiday at a different time of year, which was the beginning of the year was when we actually kicked off our new year, which makes a lot of sense. It's a time when the world comes back to life. It's the time of harvest and the spring harvest, the first harvest of the year. Makes a lot of sense. That's one thing.
They got 70-degree weather.
Yes, but we'll have beautiful mountains. We already have them. The mountains are green and you see snow on them too. I was wondering whether the poppies are getting frozen right now.
I bet they are.
It's not good. Super blooms. Okay, so Harvey pointed out one really, really important thing, which is it's the first month. There's another thing which is so obvious that no one's counted on it yet. And a lot of people have read the Torah many times and not noticed this very strange thing that you just read it, or I just read as well. Somebody point out this other fact that you just didn't notice it because it totally goes against everything that you've ever thought about Passover. Michael, you might remember this. We've talked about it before. Okay, read the 2 lines to yourself right now. If you weren't Jewish, if you never went to Passover, if you never heard of Passover, what does this tell us here? There's 2 holidays. It's so obvious you didn't notice it because it goes against everything you ever thought, which is that Passover is a holiday that we make a sacrifice. Well, we don't do the sacrifice anymore, but we have an afikomen and we have a shank bone on our plates and we have a roasted egg on our plates. All these things that we remember. And Rabban Gamliel tells us Pesach. We have to tell about the Pesach, the Passover offering. Oh, we also have to talk about the matzah and we have to talk about the maror. Well, it doesn't say anything yet about maror, but it does tell us that we have Pesach and we have a matzah holiday. What's interesting, of course, is it seems like there were two holidays. And guess what? They were combined. There were two different spring holidays that our ancestors celebrated. One was a Passover holiday, which they originally celebrated on the 14th. And there was a Hag HaMatzot that they celebrated on the 15th. And they were combined. And we don't talk about it anymore. But there probably were two different harvest holidays. They were two different traditions. Maybe the northern Israelites celebrated one and the southern Israelites, the Judites celebrated another. Maybe the people who came out of Egypt with one tradition celebrated something and other Israelites celebrated something else. Look, we don't know.
So like today, we have like the first, every night's good, important, but the first 2 nights are.
No, that's a good point, right? Mike says, that's why we have 2 Seders. Well, no, the first 2 nights we consider Mikra Kodesh, we consider them holy because Jews who live outside of Israel, out in the diaspora, celebrate Passover for 8 nights, whereas this, it's clearly 7 nights. The extra nights of Mikra Kodesh on the first 2 ends, on the second 2 days, are because in the diaspora we weren't sure. The 8th night of Sukkot is important, but the 8th night of Passover doesn't say anything because it's not a special holiday. Some people say that the 8th night of Passover is actually the Atzeret, is actually that extra day is actually Shavuot, which we celebrate 7 weeks later. That the Atzeret, that the bonus day is actually Shavuot. There's a theory that that's why we have that, is because the 8th day of Passover is actually Shavuot, a delayed Atzeret, a delayed festival. But look, if we're sociologists, or if we're social archaeologists trying to uncover the reason for this, we don't really know. But the Torah is pretty explicit that there were 2 separate holidays. One was on the 14th and one was on the 15th. Today, we celebrate them together. They start on the same night and we have a 7-day holiday. But this actually seems to be 2 holidays. Here's what it says. On the first day, you shall celebrate a sacred occasion. You shall not work on your occupations. 7 days you shall make offerings by fire to Adonai. The 7th day shall be a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. So it seems as though the 7th day, the last day, and the first day are both holy. But is that the holiday of Matzot or is that the holiday of Passover? Because the Passover holiday seems to be a 1-day holiday. The Hag HaMatzot seems to be a week-long holiday. Again, they're combined together. Correct. Because Hag HaMatzot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, starts on the same night as the holiday of Passover. We don't call them different. We say that they're the same holiday. They're clearly correct. I do. I've never been in Israel for Passover. One year I hope to be. I don't want to be. There's too many good foods that I wouldn't be able to eat. Yeah, because I could have pita bread. I could have pita bread. I can't. That's why I don't want to be in Israel for Passover. Mike said I could be there and I lose a day. I'd only have to keep it for 7 days. The trade-off is I wouldn't be able to eat all my favorite foods in Israel. I love pita bread. I love falafel. Couldn't eat any of that stuff. So it's not good. The trade-off wouldn't be good. I'd have to be in Israel for a long time. I'd have to be there longer than 2 weeks. I wouldn't want to blow 1 week of it not eating bread. Anyways.
So I can't.
Oh no.
Again.
I'm sorry. That's not fair.
I know. You can get it there.
You know-
1 year, once in a while.
It's not as frequent. She's got it frequently. So there were 2 holidays at one point for Passover. It says so. So that's the holiday of Passover. But wait, there's more. So it says, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I'm giving to you and you reap its harvest, you shall bring the first sheaf of your harvest to the priest. You shall elevate the sheaf before Adonai for acceptance in your behalf. The priest shall elevate it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day after you elevate the sheaf, you shall offer as a burnt offering to Adonai a lamb of the first year without blemish. The meal offering with it shall be 2/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in it, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to Adonai. And the libation with it shall be a wine, a quarter of a hin. Until that very day you have brought the offering of your God. You shall eat no bread or parched grain or fresh ears. It is a law for all times throughout the settlements. And from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offerings, the day after Shabbat, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring an offering of new grain to Adonai. And this is the law of Shavuot. You have a problem because the problem is the Torah actually says that it's from the Shabbat. The problem is that Passover doesn't fall on Shabbat.
Right.
It never falls on
So
Shabbat.
it should be starting next Shabbat.
It seems as though there was a time when Passover might have been fixed to fall, so that also kicked off the Omer, the counting of the 50 days, the period that goes between Passover and Shavuot. The holidays are clearly linked. That's why some people say the Atzeret, the festival at the end of Shavuot, is the last day of Passover, is the 8th day, if you will. It's a possibility. I mean, I don't necessarily believe that that's correct. It's 50 days, though, it seems like, from the Shabbat afterwards. Now, this was an argument that the Essenes had with the Pharisees and with the people who lived in Jerusalem. The Essenes believed that Shavuot had to be the day after the Shabbat, 7 weeks after. The next day after Shabbat, the Sunday, would have been the day for Shavuot. It always was. That's not the case today. Shavuot is any day of the week based on when Passover started. Passover can't start any day, right? There's certain days that Passover can't start. Passover cannot start on a Thursday. Can't. Because the second day of Passover can't be on a Shabbat. Because you can't prepare food on that day.
Right.
So the second day can't be a Shabbat. The second day of Passover. So it can be a Friday, but you can't do it can't start it on a Saturday. Or you can't start on a Thursday, so that the Saturday night would be, so that the Saturday would be that day. You can't go in from you couldn't be in a situation where you couldn't cook on Shabbat, or you can't cook on Shabbat, and therefore you couldn't prepare for Passover. So you can't have that.
You can't have any bread in your house.
Okay, but that's during Passover. This is during the 7 weeks. So what so here's what it does say. It does say, no, but she's right. It says right here. No, it says you must not have any. It said right here. You're not allowed to eat bread or parched grain.
Fresh ears?
Fresh ears or parched grain. That's what it says. So,
Fresh ears.
well,
That's what I thought.
Corn on Passover?
I didn't know
No.
that.
Well, it says new crops, right? You're not allowed to have your crops until you've offered up the 50th day, right? So on the 50th day, it says, you shall bring from your settlements 2 loaves of bread as an elevation offering. Each shall be made of 2/10 of measure of choice flour, baked after leavening as fruits to Adonai. With the bread you shall present as a burnt offering to Adonai 7 yearling lambs without blemish, 1 bull of the herd, and 2 rams, with their meal offerings and libations, an offering by fire of pleasing odor. You shall also offer 1 he-goat as an offering and 2 yearling lambs as a sacrifice of well-being. The priest shall elevate the 2 lambs together with the bread of the first fruits as an elevation offering before Adonai. They shall be holy to Adonai for the priest. On that same day, you shall hold a celebration. It shall be a sacred occasion for you, shall not work at your occupations. This is a law for all time in your settlements throughout the ages. And so this is that day of Shavuot, which is a celebration where you offer up these sacrifices, you offer up your grains, and here's what it says. No, that's the end of that part. That this is the way that you offer up
In
your
some synagogues,
wheat.
They celebrate Shavuot for 2 days, correct?
Yeah, so again, the same issue is that in the diaspora, we celebrate the holidays for an extra day so that we make sure we celebrate it on the day that was being celebrated in Israel. And so for Jews who lived in Babylonia, they wanted to make sure that they celebrated it as they were celebrating it in Israel. And they knew they were ahead of Israel in the time-wise. They knew the sun was setting. They wanted to make sure that they still celebrated the holiday. And so they celebrated 2 days of all of these festivals. All of the festivals that are mentioned in the Torah that are one day are celebrated in the diaspora for 2 days. The difference is that we now live west of Israel, which means Israel has already celebrated the holiday. So the Reform movement decided a long time ago to cut down on those second day or extra days of holidays. The Reform movement holds 7 days for Passover. It's not just Israel, it's also the Reform movement that holds you only have to do 7 days. I don't do that, so I've never told people that, yeah,
My family.
but the Reform tradition, the Reform tradition is to celebrate it for 7 days. That's why, well, here's the bottom line. I think it's a little ludicrous. I think it's somewhat funny because I don't know too many Reform Jews who celebrate for 7 days. I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you a secret now.
Don't tell anyone.
No, it's not. I didn't say it's a secret you can't share. I'm just going to tell you a secret that I've seen that nobody talks about, but I'm going to talk about it. Most Jews who celebrate it, who would say they celebrate it for 7 days, they don't celebrate it for 7 days. They celebrate it for like 1 day. So the reality is most of the people who said, well, I follow the Reform tradition of celebrating for 7 days, really aren't celebrating it for 7 days. They usually are not celebrating it much past the first day. So it's kind of weird. So for most people who can suck it up and get through 7 days, they can get to 8 days. So that's my secret. I just came clean and told you I've always celebrated it for 8 days, and I don't even talk about it being 7 days because the tradition for 2,000 years has been to celebrate it for 8 days. If you can't give up bread for 7 days, you ain't going to give it up for 8 days. And so why even get into it? You know, look, I've told you I hate the food. I absolutely hate Passover. But if I can't have discipline to give up bread for 7 days, I mean, if I can do it for 7, I can do it for 8. And we just do it like that. I mean, we always did it like that. So we've done it like that. There are a very small group of people, primarily Reform rabbis, who are the only people that I know who keep it for 7 days and who keep it for 7 days and keep it strictly for 7 days. Most people who keep it for 7 days don't keep it for 7 days. They keep it for 1 day. So that's the reality. That's my secret. I just came forward and told you a secret, which really should be a secret.
Problem.
Yeah.
They only 7 days. And they would celebrate Shavuot the day early.
Well, not really, because the day that it starts is still the day that it starts. It's not the day that it ends. It's the day that it starts. No. It's definitely not the day it ends. What it might be is the Shabbat after it started. And that's pretty clear that that's when Shavuot is supposed to be. For 2,000 years, Jews have celebrated Shavuot as 50 days from Passover, or actually not the first day of Passover, from the second day of Passover. That's when we start counting. We start counting the Omer from that day.
My question has nothing to do with that. Because if we're using the senior center, are we using their kitchen to cook?
You just said yes.
What? Yes, we're using the kitchen. Yes.
That's all.
Oh, you're wondering because it's not a kosher kitchen? You know, because Kevin actually asked me that. He says, how kosher does the kitchen have to be? I said, Your kitchen's kosher enough. Anyways, no, I mean, look, we use the kitchen at the church. We use the kitchen at the Valencia Hills Country, the Valencia Hills rec center. It's now it always yeah. I mean, there's nothing not kosher about it. It's the food. The food is not yeah, there's no mixture of dairy and meat in it. And it, obviously it's yeah, there's no non-kosher food being served.
But Sephardim do corn, right?
Well, Sephardim have allowed corn and beans and rice for a long time. The conservative movement about 10 years ago said that every Jew can do that now too.
I just read that last
So-
year. All these years I haven't been doing corn, and I've been a conservative Jew.
Yeah, so I started a few years ago eating rice and I don't really know if I've had beans. Rice, yeah, I mean, I guess we've had beans too, but rice, and my wife still doesn't feel comfortable doing it. But I always had peanut butter in my house. We always had peanut butter during Passover. So my mother always felt that legumes were ridiculous to not allow. And so I always had peanut butter and matzah as kind of like my staple.
Once you get the matzah down, if you have-
Yeah, so people though, nowadays conservative Jews have allowed it. We have rice now as well, so that now we can have things like sushi during, I mean, we don't eat meat, we don't eat fish, but we have avocado rolls, cucumber rolls during Passover now. It gives us one other thing we can eat, but we only started doing that a few years ago, having rice. But corn, yeah, technically is allowed too. And again, these were all things that were not in the Torah as things that were the forbidden grains, if you will. All right. This part we've heard too. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all that way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and stranger. I don't know, I'm your God. So that is the law of the gleanings and of the payot. The corners and the gleanings, the leket and the payot. Those two words. Yeah, it's got to be like a tithe, right? That's how the Talmud gets into the descriptions of the corners. And if your field doesn't have a corner, if it's a circle, they give explanations for how you, yeah. Oh no, the Talmud tells us. Oh, it goes on. It goes on and on, the discussions. Now, we get to the other holidays. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people thus, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe complete rest, a sacred occasion commemorated with loud blasts. Yeah, it's Rosh Hashanah. It says it's the time of Mikra Kodesh, of hearing the Zikron Truah, hearing the sounds of the Truah, of the shofar. It actually doesn't say shofar there, it says Truah, okay?
It's the head of the year, but it's not the first month.
No, but it actually doesn't say, by the way, it doesn't say the Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't say the head of the year. It just says it is a day of complete rest during the Babylonian exile. The Babylonians celebrated the new year during the fall. And so Jews started following that tradition. And then it becomes a Rosh Hashanah. Here it's just a Truah. It's a day of hearing the sounds of the shofar. So, holy moly, wait a second. There's 2 lines about it. Did I miss something? No, I didn't. The Torah doesn't give us a whole lot, at least in Leviticus, about what we're supposed to do for Rosh Hashanah. Seems like we made a whole lot about a holiday that's got 2 lines. Why am I telling you that? Because we just read about line about Shavuot. That's a lot about Shavuot. That's a lot about Passover here. There's a lot about Passover. Well, not a lot, but 20 lines. This has got 2 lines. 2 lines. 2 lines. Not as important to our ancestors. They would have said, what are you doing on Rosh Hashanah? You guys are going nuts. You're going crazy. What do you do for Passover? What do you do for Shavuot? Most Jews couldn't tell you what Shavuot even is. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, mark the 10th day. It's not Mark. It's not just me, right? It's everybody. So mark The 10th day of the 7th month is a day of atonement. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall practice self-denial, and you shall bring an offering by fire to Adonai. You shall do no work throughout that day, for it is a day of atonement. Well, that actually says Yom Kippurim, on which expiation is made on your behalf before your God Adonai. Indeed, any person who does not practice self-denial throughout that day shall be cut off from his kin, and whoever does any work throughout the day, I will cause that person to perish from among the people. Oof, that's pretty strong. Do no work, whatever. It is the law for all time, throughout the ages and all your settlements. Shabbat Shabbaton, it shall be a complete Sabbath for you, and you shall practice self-denial on the 9th day of the month at evening, right? Not all day on the 9th. From evening to evening, you shall observe this Shabbat. Well, that's a little bit more, but that's it, folks, because the next holiday, as you know, is Sukkot. So here on Yom Kippur, we got a little bit more. We got a little bit more than we had for Rosh Hashanah. We've got, there you go. Ooh, Rosh Hashanah. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. It's a little bit more. You can understand now why people take Yom Kippur so seriously. You can understand why Mike's mom, you can understand why she took it so seriously, though. Because when it says you're cut off from the people if you don't do it, if it's a law for all times throughout the ages, I better take this pretty seriously. So this is an indication of how important it was for people to not be cut off and to make sure that they practice self-denial. It does not say fasting, but the rabbis say, yes, and the rabbis understood this to be fasting, not drinking, not bathing, not wearing leather shoes, and of course, not having sex. Those were the self-denials. It's not just not eating. All of those things are called self-denial. But it's very important that it's a day of complete rest. No work, but also a Shabbat Shabbaton. That's what it's called. It did not say that for the other holidays. It says it for Yom Kippur. And the last one we're going to finish up with right now is Sukkot. Now you saw how many lines we had here. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines for Yom Kippur. That's quite a lot compared to the 2 lines for Rosh Hashanah. But look at this. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, say to the Israelite people, on the 15th day of this 7th month, there shall be a feast of booths to Adonai to last 7 days. That again is on the 15th day of the month, which means it is a full moon. So underneath the full moon, you celebrate Sukkot. This says right here, Hag HaSukkot. It's 7 days. The first day shall be a sacred occasion. It's a Mikra Kodesh. You're not supposed to work. It doesn't say a Shabbat Shabbaton. It says not to do any work. But it says 7 days you shall bring offerings by fire to Adonai. On the 8th day, you shall observe a sacred occasion and bring an offering by fire to Adonai. It is a solemn gathering. You shall not work at your occupations. It is again a Mikra Kodesh, and it's the 8th day, Yom Shmini, and it says it's an Atzeret. It's a solemn gathering. It says maybe we're not exactly sure what an Atzeret is. What does the King James say an Atzeret is? A solemn assembly. It's pretty serious. It's an Atzeret, and that's why we call it Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of assembly. It's the 8th day assembly day, the 8th day sacred occasion. It is a holy day. It's a day where you're also not supposed to work. So Shmini Atzeret is an important day. These are the set times that Adonai set as sacred occasions, bringing offerings by fire to Adonai, burnt offerings, meal offerings, sacrifices, libation on each day, what is proper to it. Apart from the Sabbath of Adonai and apart from the gifts that you are, from all your votive offerings and from all your free will offerings that you give to Adonai. So Sukkot seems to have a few lines, right? But not a lot, right? It doesn't seem to have a lot. But wait, But wait. There's more. Because mark on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you've gathered in the yield of your land, you shall observe the festival of Adonai to last 7 days, a complete rest on the first day and a complete rest on the 8th day. Now, wait a second. Wait a second. We just read that. We just read that this is the 7th day, that we just read this. It's a feast of booths. But wait, now it says that it's the 15th day, you gather in all your food. And then it says, on the first day, you shall take the product of the hadar trees, the branches of the palm trees, the boughs of leafy trees, the boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before your God for 7 days. This is the holiday of Sukkot that we know of as a time for taking the lulav and etrog. Now, it doesn't exactly say exactly what stuff we're supposed to do, because it says, the product of the hadar tree, which we now know is the goodly tree. Sometimes it's called a citron, an etrog, and it says the palms and the right here it says that maybe a boat is the myrtle, and it does say the willows of the brook. It does say the arve nahal, the willows of the brook. So those are a little bit clearer, but we understand that that's myrtle, and then that's the hadar is the etrog. So Sukkot's not over. So we thought, oh, you have these lines of Sukkot, but then there's like another explanation of Sukkot. So it's probably because there were two different Sukkot traditions too, except here they were always on the same day, the 15th day. So you have a day where you were celebrating with Sukkot. It says a feast of booths, where you got in a booth and you celebrated with God, the time. You bring your offerings, you have that. And then here it gets more into this idea of it's a holiday of gathering in the yield and doing this little thing with the lulav and etrog. And it says, you shall observe it as a festival of Adonai for 7 days in the year. You shall observe it in the 7th month as a law for all time throughout the ages. You shall live in the booth 7 days. So it does say the booths. It doesn't say that you're not in booths. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths. Now, it didn't say that before when it talked about the booths, but it does now. When I brought you out of the land of Egypt, your God, Adonai. So there's Sukkot there too. So if you add up this line, this line, and this line, and this line, and this line, and well, not that line, because that just said, in addition to, these are the set times apart from Shabbat. These two lines aren't really about Sukkot, but this line is. These were lines about Sukkot. So if you look at Sukkot, it starts here first, 34, 35, 36, and then we skip down to 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. Now that adds up to quite a few lines.
8 lines.
More than Yom Kippur.
That tells you to me that Passover and Sukkot were the two main holidays.
You also know how you can tell? They're a week long.
Yeah.
The other holidays are only they're a day. If you celebrate a holiday for a week, clearly it's a pretty big day, because it's not a day, it's 7 days. Holiday for a day is probably pretty important, but it's not 7 days. It's not a festival. Hanukkah is Sukkot. And that's what I always tell people. That's why Hanukkah was so important, because it was a Sukkot that the Maccabees instituted, because they could not do the Sukkot while they were fighting. And then the last line says, so Moses declared to the Israelites the set time. Nope.
This is the last day after.
Shmini Atzeret. And Shmini Atzeret. And then why do we celebrate Shmini Atzeret on the 8th day? Because it says on the 8th day. So the rabbi said, but if we're in the diaspora and we have to celebrate an 8th day, how do we call the 8th day that's now the extra day? It's the 9th day. They didn't call it the 9th day. They called it Simchat Torah. So they invented, or not invented it, they called it by something that allowed them to celebrate that 8th day as an extra day, but not call it the 8th day, because they can't call it the 9th day, the 8th day. It doesn't make any sense. Shmini Atzeret is the 8th day. You can't have the 8th day on the 9th day. So they said it's a different holiday. And so that's how we got Simchat Torah, because it's the 9th day of the holiday. It's the extra day. It's the diaspora day. And that's it. The next parts do not have anything to do with the holidays. So we made it with 1 minute over, but we started a couple minutes late. We read the holidays. And that's why I wanted you to see. Chapter 23, Parshat Emor, has this wonderful list of holidays. It's 44 verses. And guess what, folks? The longest part of it was Passover and Shavuot. And the next longest, you saw it with your own eyes, is Sukkot. So we know how important those holidays were to our people.
We have a great time here.
Yes, we do.
We do.
And we're going to have a great time for a holiday that you just didn't hear about. Purim, which is on Monday, because it wasn't around yet. It was not during the time of the Torah. It is in the Bible, but it's the book of Esther. And we're working on it right now. At this very moment, well, we were in here, in this room, which will be filled with Purim gladness on Monday. Guess what? Wendy and Rick and Addie, we're doing a rehearsal for your Purim celebration. They're working very hard.
I'm gonna bring a shield, I think.
We need Doreen. Doreen's working very hard too. No, Doreen was not at rehearsal today, but they did have a rehearsal. She's going to be in it. She's a narrator. She just popped up to tell us she's a narrator. I don't know. Did you talk to Wendy about what you're doing? There you go. So we're going to have candy. We're going to have drinks. I will tell you, I don't know if I'm going to drink a lot at Passover this year. I mean, Purim. Why?
I remember what happened that one time.
What? That was on Purim. No, that was I wasn't drinking though. I just did it. I can't say it was because I was drunk that I did it. I tried to do the splits and I tore my hamstring. That wasn't even an alcohol related thing. That was just a stupid thing. But I will tell you that there is one Purim related thing that I had 1 year, I had what's that stuff called? Oh, Fireball. I had Fireball for Purim. I can never drink it again. I had too much of it. I didn't get sick, but I can't, I had too much of it. I can't drink anymore. I can't tell you. I did. I came as Corona. That was online. That was for Corona.
Jedi costume as that I made for my. Company that I belong
Can't remember.
to volunteer for.
It's kind of a 60s thing.
That's true, it is.
I wasn't around in the 60s.
I'll tell you,
I was born in the 60s. All right, everybody. For those who are not going to be here, we are going to stream it. I don't know if you'll get the same excitement by being on the stream. We'll be on the stream. And you know what? You can have a cocktail while you're watching it.
I'm not allowed to drink.
I didn't say you're going to be here.
I want to drink. I can't.
Oh, okay. All right, folks, be happy. It's Adar. It's the whole month we're supposed to be celebrating. So be happy, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, and hope everyone's feeling good. I talked to Joyce just before, and she's feeling better. She says every day she's feeling a little bit better, but she's still definitely too sick to be on tonight. So we hope that she'll be better soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye, thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Say goodbye, Doreen.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.